Hello, and welcome to Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County. I'm your host, John Hartwell. Our guests today are Ann Galloway and Mike Toto, both members of DFA and also of the Media Initiative, a progressive group that works to highlight issues and positions in the mainstream media. Ann is a frequent contributor to Stream of Conscience commentaries, and Mike is very active with anti-war veterans and peace activists. Ann and Mike, welcome to Stream of Conscience.
Thank you, John.
So, Mike, you recently wrote an email to other Media Initiative colleagues laying out the reasons why you think that President Obama should be primaried this year. Can you give us an overview of those reasons?
Sure, John. It's not only Media Initiative, but as you know, and hopefully maybe some in the audience know, is that I'm involved in a lot of political stuff up in the Danbury area as well. And many people share my beliefs. I tried to put them down in paper and in email form, and let me share a few with you. Okay, we all had great hopes for President Obama when he was elected and campaigned in 2008, and unfortunately I don't believe that he and his administration have lived up to the beliefs and the prayers that we had all hoped for him. Clearly, we all thought that we had another FDR in the making, someone with intelligence and who brought openness and sincerity and meritocracy to the administration. Unfortunately, those things have not come to pass.
So let's talk about some specific areas, because I know that there are several where you feel and where Ann feels that the Obama administration has fallen short. Economic policies, for example. Ann, what's your take on Obama and the economic policies we've seen in the last 2.5 years?
Well, I would agree with Mike. I think we sort of expected or hoped that we would get another FDR, and with somebody who took leadership. And instead, it's more that we got kumbaya. And in terms of the economic policies, there was a clear choice that Obama made when he selected the people in his administration on the economic end. And Robert Rubin's protégés, Larry Summers and Tim Geithner, were the wrong decisions economically. Paul Volcker, who was originally on the transition team and head of the economic advisors, he resigned. All of the best economists in the country, Paul Krugman, Stiglitz, Reich, were ignored. And instead, we got Clinton's old team, and some of those people were the same ones who created the problem on Wall Street in the first place. So it was a Wall Street focused solution that didn't take into account what we really needed to have happen. They didn't do a large enough stimulus package, and so it didn't have the effect. And Wall Street didn't pay any consequences for what they had wrought. Glass-Steagall, or whatever the equivalent might have been to restore some sanity to that, hasn't happened. And the economy is in terrible shape. And now it's Obama's fault. It's not Bush's fault anymore.
John, in addition to that, I would say there's been many a book written, as you know, recently about the inner workings of the Obama administration and some of his methods of leadership. And I think that, to a great extent, is an overarching reason why I think we need to primary President Obama. His economic, as Ann has mentioned, his economic policies have been driven by a lot of people. Rather than being the smartest man in the room, it's been driven by people who have done the same old, okay? And that's not what we need right now. We needed somebody with leadership that was going to educate America as to what the economic future of this country was going to be, not put in place the same old thing, not to make the existing or the system that happened before 2008, before the demise of, or almost demise of the system, Why return to that system? We needed a replacement, something that was going to look forward to the next century, or at least for this country, and we have not gotten that.
What would that look like to you?
Specifically, I think, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but clearly I think there are answers to why or how this country needs to fit in a niche in globalization. I think we need to return to a lot of the values that we had as we grew up in this country, is that yes, we need self-reliance, but we also need a shared common good. And this is something that Obama, I think inherently, and I think we all agree, that he's a decent man. The problem is that he hasn't really stood up for those principles and the necessary things that make a common good. He's allowed the voice of the Fox News and for the rightists and for the unfortunate extremes in the Republican Party to take foothold and to hold the conversation.
But just to push back a little on the stimulus issue, for example, I remember that it wasn't just the Republicans who were balking at a larger stimulus number, but it was also significant Democrats in the Senate, like Max Baucus, and that without those people, there would have been no package at all. So where was Obama to blame? What could he have done differently?
Well, John, if I may, Mike made a comment about leadership. In my professional career before I retired, I coached executives on leadership. And there's a leadership model that's called situational leadership, which really says most people who seek leadership positions have a preferred style. But the best leaders understand that if a particular style doesn't work, you have to employ a different style. Mm-hmm. And in order for you to have the kind of collaborative style work, which I think is clearly Obama's preference, you have to have a willingness and an ability on the part of those who follow to be collaborative in return. And even people like Max Baucus saw very quickly that if he pushed back, it was probably going to work. And really, what Obama needed to do if he were going to be successful was to take a much more proactive, directive approach and say, this is what I want. I mean, in healthcare, he never said what he wanted until the battle was half over. And I'm going to the people who elected me to see that we get it. And in that first couple of years, with Nancy Pelosi as head of the House, I think he could have achieved it, but he had to take the ball, and he didn't do that.
So let's look at a couple of other areas. The environment, for example. I know that there are some issues there that you'd like to talk about.
Absolutely. One of the biggest problems I have is with his recent ruling on the EPA, relaxing the EPA standards, or at least the EPA standards that we're trying to get better or cleaner air for us in the future. That to me is a capitulation to the forces, all the forces that deny climate change and all those various things that are against a better life for us. Okay, I think it's a false premise to say that we have to trade off environmental policies for a better future, a better economic future. To me, that's false. Germany has proved that. There are many countries that have proved that, and we just need leadership in that regard.
You don't agree with some of the people who say that some of the environmental regulations that were being proposed would have decreased the jobs and
Absolutely
harm
not.
the economy?
Absolutely not. Maybe momentarily, but clearly there are so many things that about a green future that can be positive. I'm a retired architect. I can tell you right now is that going green is the wave of the future. It's going to it'll obviously produce more jobs. I shouldn't say obviously, but it is. I think it's statistically proven that it will include more jobs. I think the other thing was the oil leases. The beginning, if we all remember, the beginning promise was, from Obama was, or statement was, hey, we have a lot of oil leases that have not been drilled, that have not been acted upon. Before we add any more to that, we should have them drilled. What happened to that? Like once again, capitulation, and more oil leases were given, and fast-track oil drilling. That is another mistake. Tar sands. That's another big one. I know Ann can talk to you about that because she has a particular peeve about his actions on that regard.
Tar sands present dirty energy, and the proposal now to get those tar sands from Canada is to put a pipeline right through some aquifers that some of the Midwestern states that are agricultural states are concerned that's going to poison their crops. I mean, talk about a penny wise and pound foolish. The other thing is, as far as pollution is concerned and the green technology, that was such a terrific opportunity for jobs and development in this country, and some of it's already been outsourced to China. Long term, if we don't do something about that, the planet will not be able to keep humankind alive, or for that matter, animals and plants too, that we used to eat. It's just foolish not to have taken that as an opportunity to solve both the fuel problem and the environmental problems in one fell swoop. And to ignore both is shameful.
Well,
it's tragic.
I do remember that Obama significantly increased the fuel mileage standards.
He did.
Yes, 1 point for the good guys.
I think, John, we're not here to say that Obama has been totally bad. Absolutely not.
No.
And clearly, I think Ann would share my opinion that had I to redo my vote between Obama and Biden versus McCain and Palin, no questions, hands down, I think I would have voted for Obama, even with all his faults and all his problems. We're talking about making Obama better or changing him for somebody that we believe can do a better job as far as leadership. This is a crucial time for this country. We need leadership, effective leadership that is not going to capitulate, that is going to take the bull by the horns and run with the ball and show this country what it needs. One of the biggest failures, as far as I'm concerned, is that he Obama, had a following, a phenomenal following, especially from the young. In the 2008 campaign, 2009 campaign, 8 campaign, is that they were all for him. He used the internet effectively. He had the message on. It dissipated. As soon as the election was over, that internet became unused or was for contribution, collecting. It's the most unfortunate thing, I think, about his campaign or his presidency.
Well, what about, and I know you're very concerned about civil rights and the rule of law.
One of the reasons that I supported Obama in the primaries is that I was so concerned about criminal behavior in the Bush administration. And I assumed that a constitutional lawyer would want to return us to the rule of law. There have been no prosecutions of war crimes. And he's continued some of the same illegal policies that were big news in the Bush administration.
Can you be more specific?
The recent killing of Al-Awlaki was something that really is extra jurisdictional. It should not have been done the way it was. If there was a case to be made about an American citizen who was a foreign agent, or however you want to call him, I think the case should have been made to the American public first, so that they could at least understand what position he was taking, or we were taking. I don't agree with the position, but at least a discussion should have made. That's not saying we should have known where and how he was going to kill him or drone him to death or whatever it is, but at least an understanding. This is the problem with a president who does not know how to communicate. The amazing thing about Obama was that he was the phenomenal communicator in the campaign. And it turns out that once he has become president, he just does not know how to communicate with the people.
But also, while you got to give him credit for, his Supreme Court nominations have helped, but we're still at 5-4. However, we have prosecutions of all of those people who said that waterboarding was fine. It's documented. We know which ones they are. We don't know all of the waterboarding that actually occurred, But those people should be held accountable. That's torture. You know, we talk about America being the model for the rest of the world in democracy, and we're behaving like a terrorist state in so many different ways. It's disturbing, it's embarrassing. And he's continued it. He received the Nobel Prize, frankly, before he even had a chance to demonstrate which way he was going to go. I wonder whether the Nobel Prize Committee wishes they hadn't given him the prize. He hasn't earned it.
So let's talk about health care. You know, the Obama administration got through a bill in a sharply divided Congress. Right. It took every ounce of energy that they had to get through what they got through. If the bill is upheld in the Supreme Court, we know it's going in that, it will be reviewed this year in the Supreme Court. If that mandate is upheld, we will see another 40 million people be covered by some sort of health care that weren't covered before.
That's certainly the good news, John, and there's no question it's better if it's upheld. It will be better than what we had before. But here again is, I think, a question of where Obama's leadership might have made a big difference. He sort of let the Congress hassle with that before he kind of, you know, pitched in with his views. And single payer was not permitted to be at the table. Now, anybody who's taken negotiation skills 101, we're not talking about some of these really polished negotiators, knows that you never start at the position where you want to wind up. You start to give yourself some wiggle room in the negotiations. Without single payer on the table, he automatically defaulted the public option position. That's not something that was really difficult to figure out. He didn't have to want single payer. He had to know that he needed to use that as a means of getting something better than, I think, that was a close one on the public option. I think if it had been managed differently, we might be better off.
In the Clinton administration, when we tried for universal health care, that they took the Clinton administration took the exact opposite tack. They said, we're going to write the bill and we're going to give it to you, Congress, to pass. And that was rejected by the Congress at the time, which was run by Democrats, because they were seeing that the administration had overreached. And so the Obama administration went the other way. They said, okay, we want a health care bill and we're going to let you do it. Now, it seems to me that, you know, you can't win either way you go about it. This is the most difficult issue domestically that this country has faced in the last 60 or 70 years. Ever since World War II, various Democratic administrations have tried to do some kind of health care that's going to cover people, and each time there's been an extreme, enormous pushback from different parts of the entrenched interests. Obviously, that's going to be happening. Obama took a role that said, we're going to let you do this. I'm going to work some deals on the side to make it work with the insurance companies, with the pharmaceutical companies, trying to bring them to the table so that everybody will be on board. John, I don't see what was wrong with that.
John, that's an example of what I believe is what's wrong with politics today.
But is it what's wrong with Obama today? I mean,
it is because he's bought into the system, as far as I'm concerned, is that what he's done...
How can he have done it differently?
He could have gone to the people.
Yes.
He should have gone to the people and educated the people. The only way we're going to stop the intransigent Republicans, as well as those Democrats who obviously want to keep the system as it is, our good Senator Lieberman is one of them, especially with the health care policy, is that we need to get the people behind and first educate them and get them behind Obama or the administration and the right way to go before, and let them put the pressure on the politicians. Obama can't. There's no doubt about it. We understand that. No administration at this stage can, unless they're reactionary, unfortunately, as we see it. We need to get the people behind it. That's what's so promising about today. We are seeing movement from the people, okay? Whether it's the Tea Party, I don't agree with the Tea Party, but they were angry, and I'm angry. And I think Ann is angry, and you are angry, okay?
I'm certainly disappointed.
You're disappointed, okay. But I am angry, and because of all of the missteps and the promises made and unkept, okay? I don't fault Obama for everything, and he's only a human being, of course, but he's our president, he's supposedly our leader, And the promise lost is the biggest tragedy of all.
So let's think about going forward. President Obama is obviously going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. I don't think that there's anything that anyone can do.
We probably agree with that.
Okay.
Right.
So let's just very quickly look at history. 1976. Reagan, primaries, Ford. Ford loses the general election. 1980, Kennedy goes up against the sitting president, Carter. Carter loses the general election. 1992, George Bush the First had primary opponents. He loses the general election to Clinton.
Okay.
Time and time again, year 2000, Ralph Nader comes at the Democratic Party from the left. The Republicans win. Virtually every time that we see a strong challenge from the wing of the sitting party, the sitting party loses and the other guys get in control. So my question to you is, do you really want Mitt Romney or Rick Perry or Michelle Bachmann or Herman Cain to be president or vice president? Is that really where we're going?
Of course not.
Okay. But tell me why you think that you can do something to primary the president and not end up hurting him and putting the other side in power.
First of all, I'd like to backtrack just for 1 second. The examples that you gave certainly showed what the result was. That doesn't mean it's a question of whether the tail wagged the dog. Those other candidacies, those protests, if you will, derived from a lot of unhappiness, which undoubtedly, or I think it's a reasonable assumption to make, also was were reflections of what happened, how the public was feeling. They might have happened anyway. I mean, except in the case of I think without, in 2000, it would have made the difference. That's probably the only one. I mean, it's hard for me to think on my feet about all of that. But so the question is, and I agree with you in principle that we certainly don't want to be spoilers. The alternatives this year are appalling. The question is there anything we can do to influence what's going to happen next in a positive direction? I think that's the right question. And that's something we should talk about.
You're presupposing, John, is that Obama will win the election if he is not primaried.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't agree with that. I strongly believe that he will have his hands immensely full and probably will lose the election if he does not dramatically show some guts and some leadership style. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if he is challenged. And when I say challenged, I'm not talking about only a primary. I'm talking about enough people standing up and speaking out and saying, hey, President Obama, you're wrong. You need to change your ways. We need to step forward and show this country what it's all about. We need to educate the people. We need to listen to the young people that are down on Wall Street today. We need to listen to everybody's voice, not just the Tea Partiers, not just the people that are on Fox TV, okay? We need to start moving. And I think that's the only way Obama has a chance to win. But more importantly, has a chance to win as the true progressive or true Democrat that we think he is.
Well, I certainly don't know whether Obama will win one way or the other. I just point out to you that history is very clear. What has happened in the past is that every time that a sitting president has been challenged from his own party, from the wing, that president is lost.
Yes.
And so the real concern here is, if it's not Obama, who is it? Because it's not going to be another Democrat. We know that Obama is going to be the Democratic nominee. So the question is, would we weaken him? You feel you would strengthen him. We do. The major concern out there is that, in fact, it would be the opposite. It would weaken him and that he would lose. So that's what we always have to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible dilemma.
It is a dilemma. It absolutely is.
Yes.
Well, we'll revisit this situation as we get closer to the election.
Good.
We know
Good.
that there's a long way to go yet. We certainly
Absolutely.
don't know who it is going to be on the other side. And we don't know.
And I think the next month or two, given the fact of all of the things that are happening around the country, are going to be very important as to how and which way we go forward.
Well, let's make an arrangement to come back together, and we'll talk about this as the election begins to heat up.
Very good.
Okay.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you, John.
I was stung recently by a comment from my closest friend. I had told her that I was so disgusted with politics these days that while I intended to vote in 2012, I planned to walk into my polling place with a clothespin on my nose. She replied by telling me that this was disrespectful. After recovering from the equivalent of a child's being sent into timeout, I have spent an inordinate amount of time pondering this charge. And here's my problem. If a simple, innocent gesture, which doesn't threaten a soul, is treated as evidence of disrespect, how can anybody register displeasure using this yardstick and still hope to make some sort of a statement? Should we ignore raving mobs who threaten gay citizens or police brutality against peaceful demonstrators? Should we accept that our military is killing innocent civilians in other countries with airstrikes? Should we consent to now legalize bribery in which corporations write their own legislation for lawmakers to submit in order to loosen environmental protections that could save the planet? Or while protecting obscene profits for pharmaceutical companies? Should we lift our pinkies over a cup of tea and smile across the table at congressional representatives who are more worried about debt reduction than our Social Security and health care benefits, but won't let tax breaks for our wealthiest citizens lapse? Aside from the obvious fact that clothespins don't do much to affect seriously needed change, what am I missing here? What about respect for constitutional protections, which public officials swear to uphold? Clarence Thomas sits on the Supreme Court, yet he has failed to recuse himself on more than one occasion in which he has had a clear conflict of interest. If I were to meet Justice Thomas, would I be expected to be respectful and polite? I certainly wouldn't shout at him. Actually, I'd try to cross the street to avoid talking to him altogether. From where I sit, fancy titles don't command respect, nor do those who fix elections to prevent students and minorities from voting. Fairness commands respect. Collaborative behavior does. Seeking the greatest good for the greatest number does. Standing up to bullying does. But when elected officials, some from both parties, choose to cater to the wealthy, privileged few at the expense of everyone else, and thus fail to uphold their oaths of office, they do not deserve the respect they seem to assume of right. They haven't earned it. And what's in a clothespin anyway? This has been a Stream of Conscience commentary. I'm Ann Galloway. Thanks for watching.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in learning more about progressive political action in Fairfield County, please check out our Democracy for America group. We meet the first Wednesday of the month, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Silver Star Diner in Norwalk. We always welcome new members. Remember, change is possible, and you can make it happen. This has been Stream of Conscience, and I'm your host, John Hartwell. We hope to see you again soon.